Hi, welcome back to Carrie's Kitchen. I'm Carrie. This is my kitchen. Today we're going to make a linguine with a spicy red marinara that's going to have, I suppose it isn't a marinara, it's a spicy red sauce with portobello mushrooms, bell peppers, a little garlic and onion, and a touch of a spicy red pepper. So it's going to have a little hint of an arrabbiata, if you will. And we're going to do it as a red wine tomato sauce. Okay, so let's get started. First, I'm going to turn my pan on to medium-high. I'm going to chop and saute some onions. I'm going to want them to get a little caramelization on them, so I'm going to start it at a medium-high and make sure it gets pretty hot before I put the onions in. Because I don't just want them to sweat, I want them to caramelize a little bit. And I'm going to kind of keep an eye on the oil, and once it gets, like right now, it won't even run down my pan, hardly. You can see the veins, the legs, if you will. Once it gets hot enough, it'll just swish around and I'll be able to feel the heat with my hand. So today I'm going to use a white onion. I actually often use red onions for this dish. White's just what I had in the house. And this is a really big onion, so I'm only going to use half. The other half I'm going to put in this little guy. If you do not have one of these, it's called an onion keeper. If you don't have one, get one. They rock. It's just a little onion that you put your onions in. I have a tiny little half a yellow in here. You put it in there, and there's a little line on it that says, like, line up here, locked. It's fantastic. Believe it or not, you can even put chopped onions in here. Your fridge will not smell like onions at all. And I just put it in the drawer with all my other vegetables. All right, so I'm going to slice like this. 1, 2, 3 across. And then through the middle. Just a basic chop. A little messy today. All right, so what I'm doing now, again, my favorite mixing bowls, I'm using this bowl as a trash bowl. It's all food stuff that's going in here, but anything, as I'm cooking, instead of having to keep going to the trash can that I don't need, like the ends and peels of my onions, I'm throwing in here. And then at the end, I can dump what's in this bowl into the trash. It's a lot easier. So I've got my onions all chopped and ready to go, and the oil's hot enough. So I'm going to put these right into the oil. Little chop and drop. I believe Rachel Ray says that. And I'm going to salt these up. And a touch of pepper. I really believe in seasoning every layer of my food as I cook it. This needs a touch more oil. Every layer of my food as I cook it, because it adds so much more dimension to whatever it is you're cooking. So next I'm going to take a green onion. This is a bell pepper. I'm going to take a bell pepper. And the way I like to do these is just going down the sides. So you just go straight down the side, all the way around, and it will separate automatically this little guy for you. Boop, done. And I have my 4 ready to slice and dice bell peppers. So I'm just going to go in long slices like this, and I'm going to dice them up. What's nice about the bell peppers is they're going to lend a sweetness to the sauce. Which helps a lot with the acidity of the tomato sauce. Something about the sweetness and the caramelization of the onions really helps cut the acid. We're also going to add a little red wine to this dish, and what's fantastic about the red wine is that it adds an earthiness to the dish as the alcohol cooks out of it that you just can't get with anything else. And that's why I feel that it's a great accompaniment to mushrooms. I feel like whenever I'm doing a red wine red sauce, if I have mushrooms in the house, add them. You get some extra vitamins, sort of a meatiness too to a vegetarian dish, which is excellent. I happen to have portobellos. Crimini mushrooms would work fine with this. Button mushrooms, whatever you've got on hand. But I buy portobellos a lot when they're on sale and then just kind of use them throughout the week. A lot of people really hate this part, this whole prepping part, the slicing and dicing. I love it. It's so, I don't know, it helps you get into the creative part of what's happening when you cook. All right, so I want to give my onions a little more time before I add the bell peppers. And then once they start getting a little brown, enough caramelization to them, I'll add in the bell peppers just so that they can open up to be ready to mingle with everything. In the meantime, I'm going to put them in my small mixing bowl just to hang out till I'm ready for them. And now I'm going to work on my portobello mushroom cap. Portobello mushrooms, you don't want to soak them. They get too watery and they're harder to cook with, and they tend to get waterlogged and lose their flavor, and they don't soak up your sauces and stuff as well. They don't marry as well with everything else if you get them too wet. So I rinse them under running water, and then I take a paper towel, one of the small ones of your Selecta size, and clean off the top with it, kind of dry off the water, and then I turn it under and scoop out, kind of dust the gills and scoop out any other little ickies you might see inside. And they're stemmed, too. All right, cool. So I'll get this guy ready, too, while I'm at it. I think I'm going to use this knife for this. And I'm going to go fairly chunky on these because it's going to sort of be the meat of our dish. We are going to have chunks of tomatoes in here because I am going to use some canned diced tomatoes. So I don't want them the same size and texture as the tomatoes either. Obviously the mushrooms aren't going to have the exact same texture because I'm going to cook the sauce long enough, but I want them to taste and feel like a mushroom and not just lend flavor to the dish. I want texture from them. So we're going to do pretty decent sized chunks. If you look. And some of them, like that's about the size I want, if you can see it in my hand. So it's bigger than a diced tomato, but it's not gigantic. So everyone's getting mushrooms in their in their plate of pasta. I love the smell of cooking onions. Always have, always will. All right, so these are just about ready to add my bell peppers. All right, time to add these green bell peppers. And it's one bell pepper. One bell pepper, half of a large onion. Any kind of onion you prefer. Now I'm going to take my mushrooms and I'm going to put them in this little guy. Now I moved my garbage bowl out of the way just so you know what it looked like I had it here. But it's going to be over on the side, and as I'm done with stuff, like my garlic peels, when we get to that, they're going to go in there. So now that my green onions are in here, they're going to release a little bit of water, so I don't need any more olive oil right now. I'm going to add a little bit more salt. I'm going to let these soften up with the onions. Let the onions get a little bit softer, and let the bell pepper open up a little bit, and then we'll add the portobellos. Hey, what's up, little man? Say hi to everybody. Hi. Are you excited that Mommy's doing these fun little Carrie kitchen things? He's silly. He's silly. All right, so everything here has just enough softness and color that I am ready to put in my portobello mushroom cap. Again, if you were you could use any mushroom with this, but don't use a canned mushroom. Use a raw mushroom because it's going to release certain amounts of liquid and then also absorb certain amounts of flavor from the sauce. You're going to have a much flavorful end result if you use a real raw mushroom versus, a raw mushroom versus a canned mushroom. And again, I don't need to add any more olive oil because these mushrooms are going to open up and release a lot of water right now. And then we're going to deglaze with a little red wine. Now the mushrooms they're going to release a little, but they're also, as everything's sort of caramelizing, they may get stuck to the pan a little bit. So when we deglaze, now I keep using the term deglaze. If you don't do a lot of cooking, basically the acid in either a wine or a vinegar, and sometimes even just adding your tomatoes to a dish, if they're juicy enough, is enough acid. But when you add your wine or your vinegar to a pan, when stuff's stuck on it, when the pan's gotten glazed over, it deglazes it. You'll notice it removes it. And all of those bits that get stuck to the pan lend so much richness and flavor to a dish. So if you're not in the habit of deglazing and you're frustrated stuff's always stuck to your pan, make deglazing a part of your process whenever you're making sauces. Just add a touch of white wine or red wine and get that unstuck, and it'll add a lot of richness to your sauce. Even if you don't drink wine, having wine for cooking is great because all alcohol cooks out, but it adds a lot of richness to the flavor. Now, for those of you who do drink wine, I would not cook with a wine I wouldn't drink. I've heard chefs say this a million times, and I totally agree. I used to think it was hogwash, and then I tried cooking with some wines that I wouldn't drink, and the end result was not nearly as quality of a flavor. So, it's starting to really come together here. The mushrooms are really loosening up, but it's not quite there yet. I'm waiting for it to get a little stickier, and then we'll deglaze it. But right before deglazing, we're going to add garlic. So, I'm using 3 garlic cloves. So you take your garlic, if you don't know this trick, lay it down, grab your knife, smack it like that, and your skins will come right off. The peels come right off. Look how easy. Done. Into my garbage bowl. It makes them much, much easier to peel. You don't need to buy peeled, pre-chopped garlic once you learn this trick. Alright, so I've got my 3 cloves of garlic. For this dish, I'm going to want them fairly finely chopped, or diced if you will. Usually I just go once down the middle, like this, and then across the opposite direction. And then back this way. And back this way. Some dishes I like larger chunks of garlic. This one's going to have so many other chunky things in it, or a couple other chunky things in it, that I don't need the added texture of it at all, but I do want the flavor in there. So I'm going to add this to our mushrooms, onions, and peppers mixture that we have going. And the garlic, you got to be careful once you add garlic to a hot pan like this, that you don't cook it too long, because it'll burn and get very bitter very quickly. So I usually just use my sense of smell. I put it in there, and you just smell it, and when it smells like, ooh, garlic bread-ish, that's when it's a nice happy garlic smell versus an icky one. Then you can start adding your other ingredients. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to add 3 tablespoons or a small can of tomato paste. Normally I get the smaller cans, sometimes I get the bigger ones depending what's on sale. This is basically 2 small cans in this size. This is a larger can. So I'm taking half of this can and adding it to the sauce. Now when you use tomato paste, you want to let the tomato paste warm up closer to the temperature of what's going on in your pan before you add the liquids, because it can tend to kind of be clumpy and your sauce won't have the right consistency. So you put your paste in first, kind of mash it around with your stuff. You'll see it, literally it looks like a paste still. But I'm kind of mixing it with everything else, smushing it about. And now I can add my sauce and my chopped tomatoes. I'm going to add 1 large can of Hunt's is my favorite, but you can use any brand you like, as long as, read your ingredients, read your labels, please, people. It's a big thing in my family to read every label on everything and make sure I'm using natural product. The only thing in here it's tomato puree. That's all it is. So, you don't need preservatives. Oh, goodness. You don't need preservatives. You don't need junk. It's been canned. You don't need anything to retain color. You don't need a bunch of junk in your tomato sauce. Alright, so I've added the jar of tomato sauce, and I'm just going to slowly incorporate it. You don't want to stir too vigorously or you'll have big sloppy messes. And I'm just going to kind of slowly get that to where it's one even consistency. And once that happens, I can start adding more ingredients. But first, we got to make sure that this is all evenly incorporated and together. that the sauce and the paste are teaming up as a one fluid unit. All right, it's looking great. Now you're gonna notice, gosh, that seems really thick to me. It is really thick right now, we're still adding stuff. So we're gonna add 1 can of diced, all natural diced tomatoes. This one happens to have a little spicy red pepper in it, which I like. Usually I just buy the plain, but I found that some of these with additional ingredients are great. And this one makes a wonderful arrabbiata sauce. That's not exactly what we're making today by any means, but it'll have a nice, just a little bit of heat to it that I really enjoy. I love the smell of Italian food cooking. I don't know what it is. I'm Irish. I don't know. But Italian food, it brings so much comfort to me. I love it. Italian food and Mexican food. And I think because I grew up in the Southwest and there was a lot of Mexican food in my upbringing. But I was an Irish French family. So we didn't have a lot of, we didn't make a lot of Mexican food, but we went out to a lot of Mexican restaurants. But my mom grew up in New York and dated an Italian boy in high school. I learned a lot of good Italian recipes back in the day, and I grew up eating a lot of good, authentic Italian food. And I'm a sucker for it, still. All right, so I'm gonna lower my heat down to a medium, and now that it's starting to come up to back to a warm temperature altogether. And then I'm going to add some red wine to it. I probably should have measured that for you, but I really like to eyeball my wine because it just depends on the sauce. That's perfect. I would say that's 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup of wine. Different sauces are different. Because this one has mushrooms in it, it's going to have a lot of earth tones, which is why I sort of added a little bit more, because I've also added the green peppers, which are going to lend brightness to the dish. But the garlic and the mushrooms are going to keep it earthy. We're adding the red wine. I feel like it's going to keep it rooted. And then the brightness of the green pepper and the tomato will kind of keep it alive. I'm going to put in a little bit of dried basil. I don't always use dried herbs, but sometimes I feel like they're great, especially with something like this. This is going to stew for a little bit on low, and I think that the dried herbs work really well for that application. What I love best about fresh herbs is you can add them at the tail end of any sauce or any dish and brighten, completely change the way it hits your palate. It's amazing. My 2 favorites, cilantro and basil. Hands down. I don't know if I can even decide between the two. When I'm eating cilantro, I say it's my favorite. When I'm eating basil, I say it's my favorite. So I think they're tied. Now this dish, I'm still debating on if I'm going to add some basil at the end or not. I'm kind of digging the earthiness. So right now, I don't smell everything coming together. It smells like tomatoes and wine right now. So what I want is for it will have a much more incorporated, earthy, saucy smell. It'll smell like a restaurant in here in about 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this to low, and I'm just going to let it hang out. I'm not going to take the lid off or anything except for maybe in about 10 minutes. I'm going to come check on it. By then it should be simmering really nicely, and I'm going to give it a little stir. And if it's simmering too vigorously, I'll lower the heat. Otherwise, I'm just going to allow it to hang out on low for 20 to 25 minutes. And then I'm going to start my water for my pasta. So I want to make sure that this is about ready before I start my water because the pasta is going to cook really quick. I have my oven preheating at 350. Tonight's dinner we're going to serve with some great local French baguette. I like to either use French bread or ciabatta for this particular style of meal because the outside gets really crunchy when you bake it, but the inside's still a little soft to soak up sauce, so you get the crunchy and the soft. Good stuff. Welcome back. Okay, so now I'm going to start my pasta water. I just turned on the heat on high. We'll get it rolling, and we'll put some pasta in. The pasta isn't going to take very long to cook. I'm sort of going to stir my sauce one more time because it's basically ready. It smells great. You can smell that everything's incorporating really well and that the alcohol of the wine is cooked off. I like the color. It smells ready to eat. So I'm going to turn it down to warm so that it stays warm for me to serve with my pasta. So while I'm waiting for this to get hot, I'm going to prep my bread for the oven. What I like to do so that the inside stays soft, the outside's crunchy, but that it still looks pretty and it's easy to break apart, I slice it before I put it in the oven. Now you don't actually slice the pieces off. You take a serrated bread knife and slice it, I think you can see, yeah, and slice it down to about there. So it's still attached, but when it's time to break it off, you can break it off. Does that make sense? So we're just going to do that, whatever size you like. I found this was a trial and error thing because I found often I would toast the bread knowing I wanted the outside crisp and the inside soft, and I would slice it after the fact and then kill the good crunchy crust into a million crumbs all over the place trying to slice it after the fact because you want it warm too. So now for my little family, I'm only using half of this loaf. So the trick is, turn this, there we go. The trick is going to be, what do I do with this? We don't eat a ton of bread. I'm not going to make a bunch of sandwiches. I use whole grain bread for my sandwiches. We work the next few days. So I found a good way to store these in the freezer. What I do is I put it right back in the little bag it came in. But you got to do it today, not tomorrow. If you do it right now, you're set. I roll up the end real tight, and I simply wrap it 2 or 3 times, usually like twice in one direction, twice in the other direction. Make sure it's got a good seal. Pop it in the freezer with shrink wrap. It's that easy. Just make sure it has a good seal, and if you do it a few times over, you're going to get, it'll be sort of like putting it in a freezer bag, but a bag, you're going to have too much air in there. I've just found a better result for whatever reason. Then the next time you want to take it out and you're making this kind of meal, as you're doing all your prep work, you take it out, set it on the counter, and sort of comes back to a room temperature. Pop it in the oven when you're ready to cook it. Another good way to do it too is wrap it in aluminum foil. If you want to just take it straight from the freezer into the oven, it can get a little dried out, or the outside will crisp up before the inside thaws. So wrap it in a little tin foil before you bake it, and the outside will get crunchy and the inside will be soft. All right, so my pasta's ready to go, and so is my sauce. I've taken my bread out of the oven. It was the perfect crispiness, soft on the inside, and I put it inside a bread basket with a one of my fabric napkins, or you can use a tea towel. But I think that it's really important. It'll keep your bread warm. It'll keep the inside moist. The outside will not get, there's enough oxygen gets out, or moisture gets out, that it won't, the outside won't get soft and soggy, but the inside will stay warm and soft. Okay, so now I'm going to plate. The way I like to serve this particular dish is I take my tongs. Some pastas, I like to let the pasta cook in with the sauce a little bit. This particular dish, I like to make a nest with the pasta in the center when the pasta's fresh, and ladle over, do like do one more stir, and ladle the pasta over the top. So there is my sauce. Now I'm hoping you can see, if I set this down here, there it is. Now I have this fantastic cheese grater that I've had for a long time. It was given to me as a gift from a chef that I worked with, because I always loved that he had one, and he said, "Sweetie, I'll get you one." Anyway, so this is it, courtesy of Chef Marcelino Ristorante in Arizona. I always just get a good quality Parmesan. I bring it closer to room temperature so it's easier to grate. You don't want all the fats to come out and for it to get oily, but when it's really cold, sometimes it's tough to grate. If it gets a little bit soft, it's a lot easier for yourself and for guests. Like I like to do a little grating for presentation. Et voila, that's it. So here you have a linguine with a delicious portobello mushroom spicy red sauce with red wine that I'm going to pair with the Toscana blend, a blend from Tuscany, a great Italian red blend. And it's going to be served with a crunchy, toasted French baguette. Fantastic. Enjoy.